All right, lots going on. Lots going on. But we have been in this journey through the summer looking at the book of Exodus, and we've actually got a couple of weeks left before we transition into a different book of the Bible. In the fall, we're going to be looking at my favorite book, actually, of all the books, which is the book of Acts. I love Acts. Acts is the story of the early church. It's the story of the church full of the Holy Spirit, trying to figure out what it means to be a community and followers of Jesus in a complicated world. And so it feels like a good place, like a reasonable place to spend our time together. And we're going to think a lot about the shape of church, about the why, the how, the what, and what it means to live in sometimes complicated surroundings. Before we get there, though, 2 more weeks on Exodus, and we have some questions to answer. And they're really important ones. And they go basically like this. In the journey from slavery to freedom, who are we? Who are we? And more specifically, who are you becoming? Who are you becoming? Now, on the journey so far, we've seen this dramatic rescue. We've seen this escape. We've seen these Israelites move out of slavery and darkness. But at the moment, if you've got to give them a name, if you've got to work out who they are, it seems to me mostly that you might say that they are survivors. Like they're escapees. But they don't really know who they're called to be. They don't really know who they're becoming or where they are going. What they need, I suggest to you, is a new identity. And the great news is that they're about to get one. And as they get their new identity, I think we're going to hear in the echo of it our new identity too. Who we are called to be, our destiny, our purpose. What it means to be in the people of God. And so we're going to get our reading now, and we are in Exodus chapter 19. Man, we've got all the way to Exodus 19. Well done, you guys. Verses 1 through 11. If you have your Bibles, that would be great. Julia's going to come and bring that to us.
Exodus chapter 19.
Microphone.
Is it working? Can you hear me? Yes. Wonderful. This is Exodus chapter 19, verses 1 through 11. In the 3rd month, after the Israelites left Egypt, on the very day they came to the desert of Sinai. After they set out from Rephidim, they entered the desert of Sinai, and Israel camped there in the desert in front of the mountain. Then Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain and said, "This is what you are to say to the house of Jacob, and what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all the nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites." So Moses went back and summoned the elders of the people and set before them all the words the Lord had commanded him to speak. The people all responded together, "We will do everything the Lord has said." So Moses brought their answer back to the Lord. The Lord said to Moses, "I am going to come to you in a dense cloud, so that the people will hear me speaking with you and will always put their trust in you." Then Moses told the Lord what the people had said. And the Lord said to Moses, "Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow. Have them wash their clothes and be ready for the 3rd day. Because on that day, the Lord will come down on the Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people." This is the word of the God. Thanks be to God.
So the Israelites are on their journey, and they arrive at this place, this mountain. In fact, it's the same mountain, Mount Sinai, Mount Horeb, as Moses first met God at the burning bush. There's like something about this mountain. It's like the epicenter throughout a lot of the Old Testament of God's power, of his presence, of his life. And the closer you get, it seems, to this mountain, the more you sense it, you feel it. I don't think there was an earthquake like we felt this week, but there's something in it. There's something here of energy. And so when Moses gets there, he goes up to the top. In fact, he goes up and he goes down and he goes up and he goes down. The picture I have in my mind is like those speed climbers in the Olympics. Did anyone see those guys? People who could basically go vertically faster than I can go horizontally. I don't know how that works. But Moses goes really to find out like what this relationship between God and humans is going to look like. And relationships are kind of interesting, aren't they? I'm not a sociologist, I'm not a psychologist. Some of you in this room are, you're much cleverer than me. But I am a pastor. And so I've been thinking a little bit about the different types of relationships that we find ourselves in. And because I'm a pastor, I can come up with different names which all start with the same letter. So it must be right. So here's the first kind of relationship I think a lot of us find ourselves in. We find ourselves in casual relationships. And just to be clear, I don't mean like one-night stands or hooking up, but I mean like the acquaintances we have, the kind of casual friends, maybe the work colleagues, the people we meet at church every week or in school, maybe even the early stages of dating. In casual relationships, you probably know their name, they know yours. You like them, there's a sense of friendliness, but there's also no real commitment in a casual relationship, is there? If it works out great, if you've got a shared interest, if you want to spend a bit of time together, if it is a good thing to do, then cool, let's do it. But at the same time, if it doesn't work out, if it doesn't go anywhere, then actually that's fine. It doesn't really matter. Those people can just become part of your army of social media followers or something that you have somewhere out there, That's casual relationships. The second category of relationships I think we often find ourselves in are committed relationships. That's probably where a casual relationship, you hope it might go one day. Casual relationships are not like legally binding or anything like that. They might be like the platonic deep friendships we hold or family or even like romantic relationships. But there's this idea, isn't there, of bond that forms over time. Like there's a care for the other, a love, maybe even a commitment to like spend time together, to see each other. And I feel like you sort of know if you're in a bit of a committed relationship because even if you don't see the other person, when you do get back together with them, when you see them after a while, there's just this immediate connection, isn't there? You can pick up the relationship where you left it off just before. Committed relationship. The third type is consumer relationships. Now, clearly, consumer relationships are not primarily about friendship. Normally, right, in a consumer relationship, you expect to give something, and that thing is normally money, and in exchange, you hope that you are going to receive something, normally like goods and services. Or if it's not money you're giving, maybe it's like being good, like Santa, and in exchange, you expect presents to come back, right? Now, you can have quite a lot of loyalty in a consumer relationship. I have discovered, since coming to California, that here we have a very high degree of loyalty to certain brands and companies. No, we do. Watch. If I say to you, Trader Joe's or Aldi, the answer is Aldi, correct. Just me. I'm literally the only person in California who shops at Aldi. That's me. Okay. All right. If I say to you, In-N-Out or Burger King, the answer is clearly it's In-N-Out, right? If I say to you Chick-fil-A or KFC, the answer is Chick-fil-A. Yes. And if I say your car or the Metro, the answer is your car. That's nothing to do with this, right? Okay. But we feel it. Maybe you have a favorite coffee shop or a favorite restaurant that you go to. I can tell you that we have at least one board member who is so well known in their coffee shop that whenever they go, the 4 times a day that they go, they don't even need to get to the counter before the person is already giving their name and preparing their order for them. I won't tell you which one it is, Scott Summers, right? But we probably can all picture a coffee shop or a restaurant that we feel like some degree of attachment to. And probably we have a loyalty to it just long enough until there's not a better option, right? Until there's another coffee shop that opens up down the street where the coffee's a little bit cheaper or the vibe's a bit better or you prefer the drinks or your friends want to hang out there. And so you ditch the old coffee shop without a thought and you find the new one. It's a consumer relationship. And then there's contractual relationships, right? Now these also not particularly based on friendship, but there's a sense of like agreement that happens for a period of time. You know, if you were one of the people who went down to Best Buy before the Olympics to get your new 65-inch 8K Ultra HD TV, and because you're super fancy, you also got like the 5-year Geek Squad warranty. You know who you are. It's not me. Right? And you take your TV home and you put it on the wall and you rearrange your furniture and there you are watching Simone Biles win her 97th gold medal of the Olympics. And then the TV dies, right? Black screen of death, nothing you can do can resurrect it. So what do? You go back to Best Buy and you're like, hey guys, like we had an agreement. We had a contract in place. For 5 years, you had to provide me with a TV that works. It's totally within your rights to expect them to fix it or to give you a new one. And in fact, if they don't, because there's a contract in place, you can make a complaint to the ombudsman. You can get a lawyer. You can do what you want because they are legally obliged to fulfill it. It's legal and it's binding. So why tell you about those 4 types of relationships? Well, it strikes me that as human beings, generally, we want to relate to God in one of those 4 ways. Most human beings want to relate to God in one of those 4 ways. It might be like actually that we really would love to have a relationship with God that is very casual. It's like, hey God, I know you're out there, I believe you're there. If we could just hang out from time to time, that would be great. Maybe Christmas, Easter, whatever works, like that would be good. No real commitment, it's all just kind of chill. I think a lot of people want relationships with God that are consumer-based. You know, God, I'm going to pray, I'm going to do my thing, and in exchange, I would really like it if you could give me what I need. If you could bless me, or you could provide the things that I need when I pray. I think lots of people want a relationship with God that is contractual. As a religious kind of way, it's like, God, you asked me, oh, the lights are gone. God, you asked me to do certain things. And if I do those certain things, then it's only right, God, that you will provide for me the exact things that I need in return. Like I will turn up at church on Sunday. I will give some of my money. I will volunteer on a team. Like I will be nice to my neighbor. I will do this. I will do that. In exchange, God, you have to provide the things that I want you to provide for me. And even, I think, many of us, probably even in this room, we long for a committed relationship. Now, actually, we do want a sense of a friendship with God. We do want it to happen over time. We want there to be a close sense of bond and communication going backwards and forwards. But let me offer you a suggestion, a thought, a statement. I don't think that God primarily seeks a relationship with any human being on any one of those 4 levels. Now, before you all walk out the room, I think there are elements of those 4 things that are true, but actually when God desires a relationship with human beings, he's looking for a different type of relationship. And it's a different C word. It's the word covenant. Covenant. Now, the Hebrew word there, it's the word beret. And it's the basis of the identity which human beings are called into to be his people. This is the definition we have. A covenant is to enter into a formal, binding, relational partnership to accomplish a goal. Just notice the different parts of it there. A covenant is relational. It's about 2 people coming together because they have the best interests of the other at heart. You enter into covenants voluntarily. You choose to. You come mutually when there's a sense of relationship. You know, when God enters into covenant, he says like this, some things like this is like, these will be my people. I will be their God. You know, like in your life, maybe you sometimes say, like I do, hey, that's my friend, that's my dad, that's my mom, that's my brother, that's my sister, that's my Laura, that's my Will. Like, it's personal possessive pronoun. You mean it, you like it, it's soft, it's warm, it means something to you. But a covenant is also formal. It's binding. It's binding like a contract is binding. But it's not like that kind of contracts, you know, the ones we sign all the time where you go in to buy something online and you go on that form and it says, have you read our terms and conditions? And we all check, yes, because you can't buy it, but have we read the terms and conditions? No. Maybe you have. Maybe it's just me. In a covenant, there are very clear terms and conditions. There are defined outcomes. There's an idea that if you meet the terms of the covenant, if you fulfill it, then there are clear positive outcomes that are coming your way. They are benefits, or what the Bible calls blessings. But equally, if you don't meet the terms of the covenant, then there are penalties, or consequences, or what the Old Testament calls curses. And these terms, they really matter. Like, you cannot sweep them under the carpet. They are not just there for show. It's the terms of the covenant which give it the legal, binding, long-term permanence. You can't be in a covenant and go, I just got a little FOMO on, and this doesn't work for me anymore. Like, I'm chilling out, peace out, bye. That's not how you run a covenant. They really matter. And finally, then, the covenant is practical. You don't just get in a covenant because you like the other person. A covenant is supposed to achieve something. It's got an end in mind. You're supposed to do something together in a covenant that you couldn't do if you were on your own. Now, here's a couple of other things you need to know, just quickly, covenants, okay? In order to make a covenant in ancient cultures, you performed a very particular type of ritual. And I will tell you, if you are a little squeamish, sorry. This is how you made a covenant. You see it in Jeremiah, you see it with Abraham, right? The two parties making the covenant would come together, and they would take an animal, or multiple animals, like a cow or a goat, and they would take the animal, and they would cleft it in twain. They would cut it in half, down the middle, right? And they would lay out the parts of the animal, blood, the whole thing, one on one side, and the other on the other side. And they would walk right the way through the middle of the dead animal. I told you it was gross. It's gross. But what they were doing is that they were looking at this picture of death and walking through it and basically saying, I will fulfill this covenant, and if I don't fulfill this covenant, then may my fate be the same as this animal lying here in front of me. Basically, on pain of death, this is who I am now going to be. It's like a blood pact, effectively. Covenants are a really big deal. The weekly Tim Keller quote says this. Shut up. A relationship is more loving and intimate than a legal relationship, a covenant, but also more binding and enduring and accountable than a personal relationship. It's a big deal. But here's one final thing you need to know about covenant. Is what marks a covenant different from a contract? I know it's a lot of detail this morning. This is that in a contract, right, if one person doesn't fulfill their side of the deal, if they bug out, if they do something dishonest, if they don't fulfill the terms, then basically the contract ends. It's null, it's void, it has no ongoing value from that point onwards. But in a covenant, it's different. Because when two people enter into a covenant, what they are saying is, this is who we are going to be going forward, irrespective of what the other person does. This is who I'm going to be. Even if you fail, even if you walk away, even if you don't do this thing that I am going to do, I will still be this person. I have covenanted to it. It is actually your very identity, not just something that you sign. So why tell you about all of those things? Well, I tell you about them because this is what God is inviting the Israelites into in this moment. Okay, question for you. Who's the first person in the Bible to make a covenant? Any ideas? Okay, come on, guys. It's God. Okay, here's the second one, right? Who's the second person to make a covenant? It's still God. Okay, it's God. Okay, just so you know. And this is what it looks like. Watch this little video. It explains it better than I could.
A partnership with God.
A partnership like working alongside someone to accomplish a goal together.
Right, and this is actually what you see at the beginning of the Bible. God creates this good world full of all of this potential. And then God appoints these unique creatures, humans, as his partners in bringing more and more goodness out of all that potential.
But the humans don't want to partner with God. They rebel and try to create a world on their own terms.
And so this broken partnership is the Bible's explanation for why we're stuck in a world of corruption and injustice and the tragedy of death.
It's not like there's just one or two humans who have bailed on this relationship. In the story of the Bible, everyone has abandoned the partnership with God.
So what God does is select a smaller group of people out of the many, and he makes a new partnership with them called a covenant. And in a covenant, God makes promises, and then in exchange asks his partner to fulfill certain commitments. And the purpose of all of this is to somehow use this covenant relationship to renew his partnership with everybody else.
Now, there are actually 4 times in the Old Testament that we're told God initiates a covenant relationship with Noah, Abraham, the nation of Israel, and King David.
And it's through these that God is forming a covenant family into which all people will eventually be invited.
So that's the scene. In this story that we just heard read, God is inviting the Israelites to be his covenant people. Just notice in Exodus 19:5, you just heard it. Now, if you obey me fully and you keep my covenant, then out of all the nations you will be my treasured possession, even though the whole earth is mine. God is bringing them into the same covenant that he made with Noah and Abraham. It's specific, it's heavy, it's weighty. It's not something that's just generically true for all human beings. There is an invitation into this deep, intimate place of relationship. Notice what he said. You will be my people. You and me. I will be your God. And if you obey the covenant, if you follow it, you will be, he says, a holy nation. Like you'll have an identity as a community, but a holy one with a personal relationship with the divine. You'll be a kingdom with a king of God himself, but a kingdom of priests, people who can come close to God. You will be my children, and I will bless you. And I will guide you, and I will take you to the promised land where you will experience all that you long for. Together, we're going to work for the renewal of all creation so that the kingdom of God would come to the whole world. And God says to the Israelites, there's going to be particular ways that you are going to have to enact this. Particular terms, particular conditions, and we're going to get to those next week when we get to the 10 Commandments. But we should notice that God doesn't need to make this covenant. He has not much to gain out of it. He's not doing it because he needs them to do particular things, but rather because God makes covenants, the most supreme being in all of the universe, make covenants with these particular individuals because it's his nature to share, to pour out his love, to bless, to partner, to be in relationship. Now, most of us, we probably don't use the word covenant very often. I certainly don't recommend going down to Best Buy on your way home and going, hey, can I covenant you for a TV or something? Like, just not how it works. But there is something in our culture still today which is deeply covenantal in the way that we enact it and the way that we play it out. Does anyone know what it is? Marriage. A marriage. Picture the scene. Last Sunday night after church, Laura and I, we went down to Orange County, and I had the privilege of marrying Anjali and Jonathan. Here's a picture of them. You know these guys? There they are. Anjali is one of our readers. Jonathan serves on our kids team. They're an amazing young couple. And there they were, like surrounded by all their friends and their family, and had this amazing evening. And we got to marry them. Now, when we at Vintage prepare couples for marriage, we're kind of tough, actually. And we're tough in what we explain how we explain what a marriage is. We don't say it in exactly these words, but we're basically saying a marriage is not a casual relationship. It's not a consumer relationship. It's not even a contractual relationship. It's covenant. Now, you'll be very pleased to know I did not take the prime rib off the dinner table and cut it in two and throw it on the ground and say, right, guys, here you go get married. But we did, in the way that we enacted the language, invite them into covenant. This is the words. Maybe if you're married or you've been to a wedding, you've seen something like this. Angeli, will you take Jonathan to be your husband? Will you love him, comfort him, honor and protect him, and forsaking all others, be faithful to him as long as you both shall live? And the answer was, it's not, I do. It's not, I do, too many movies. Because if the question is, I do, right? It's like, do you take this lovely person who looks the best that they will ever look in their whole life and has spent the whole day getting ready in this beautiful surrounding where you're going to get an incredible meal and you have a wonderful party. Do you want to be with them? And the answer is, of course, I do. But that's not the covenant words. The words are, I will. I will. And it goes on. Jonathan, will you take, sorry, done that bit? No, it goes on. It says, I, Jonathan, take you, Angeli, to be my wife, to have and to hold, from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death us do part, according to God's holy law. In the presence of God, I make this vow, or the word covenant. And they both do it both ways round. The language is no joke. It is no joke at all, because two people are forming a relationship. They are literally saying, from this moment onwards, we are now joined together to be one. We're saying that there is now a relationship that each one holds that is more important than their own needs. That they're giving their freedom, their independence. And, this is what they're saying, is whether life goes as we expect it to, or whether it doesn't, this is who I'm now going to be. Now, we should point out there are many other types of covenant, and not all of us in any way are called into marriage covenant, and other covenants are valid and important and beautiful. But I do want you to know that, of course, covenantal marriages can still go wrong too. For lots of reasons. All sorts of different things can happen along the journey, and not least that we aren't perfect human beings and we can be a little broken in the way that we conduct our relationships. Marriage covenants can also go wrong in time. But what I do also know, though, is that when two people end a marriage covenant, and I have had the privilege of walking with some families, some covenants, some married people as they end their marriages or as they recover from them and think about new beginnings. What I do know is that despite what the movies tell you, almost nobody ever gets to the end of a marriage and says, oh, that didn't work out okay. Shake hands, let's be friends, and off we go. Why? Because you have joined something together. You have joined people together, and when those things are pulled apart, there is a sense of pain. There is a sense of damage. There is a healing that is required. And the great news is that God, by his mercy and his love for us, is all about redemption and new beginnings, and we've seen that even in our church. But why do I tell you that? Why is that relevant? Well, it's relevant because this is basically what happens in the Old Testament. See, the problem is that the Old Testament covenant between God and the people is about to go wrong. And it's going to go wrong very quickly because the Israelites are already flaking out on it. Right? By the time that Moses gets to the top of the mountain to see God, to receive the 10 commandments, which are the terms and conditions of the contract, he's going to come down, and by the time he's got to the bottom, the Israelites are going to take their gold and their silver that they borrowed from the Egyptians, remember that? And they're going to melt it down and turn it into a cow to worship, right? It's Minions level crazy, right? It is crazy. And that's just the beginning of how this thing goes down. Basically, it's within page after page after page, the Israelites start to worship other gods, disobey God. live in crazy way, treat each other horrendously. There's oppression, there's injustice. They totally ignore their side of the covenant. For thousands of years, this just goes on and on and on. Now, we should spot, like if you do read all the way through the Old Testament, there are these moments of blessing. There are these moments where the Israelites come back and they're like, oh man, we screwed this up. Like, we messed this up big time. Like, we want to come back, God, and we want to be your covenant people. And you see, like Book of Nehemiah, how God, like, forgives them and restores them. And then there's this land and blessing and protection, and all the good things start to flow again. Until 10 minutes later, when they go off and they do their own thing. In fact, most of the Old Testament really goes like this. Hey, God, we know you're there, but we don't need to be controlled. We don't really need to be told what to do. We don't want to be different from all the other people on the earth, and so we want to have freedom to do what we want to do. We don't want an exclusive relationship with you. So if you could just leave us alone and keep pouring out the blessings, we're good. It's nuts. But what does God do? I mean, think about it for a minute. What would you do? What would you do if you were God? Because this is the central tension in the whole of the Bible. See, because on one side, God has basically said, I will never leave you. I'll never forsake you. I'll never stop loving you. But on the other side of the equation is the reality that actually these people are being totally outrageous and disobedient, and God cannot bless them for their disobedience. What will God do? Now, most religions, most human beings, I think, when they think about God, they answer this question in one of two ways. The first one's called relativism. And relativism basically goes like this. Just be more chill, God. Just be nicer to them. Like, just give them a break. It's a bit like this. Yes, I know that you punched me in the face. And I know that you stole your sister's candy. And I know you took the car and, like, drove it into a lamppost. And I know you emptied the bank account of all the money, but yes, Jimmy, you can still have screen time. That's what it's like. That's relativism. It's like, just be nicer. God should just accept everything. Shouldn't have rules, shouldn't have terms. It's too harsh. Now, the other side is moralism. And moralism says, like, no way. Like, these guys screwed up big time. This is not okay. There are terms and conditions. There's a contract in place. There's prescribed outcomes. At the very least, God, you should cancel them. And you should walk out. Very least. And if you don't, you should totally kick their butts. Because they have been totally outrageous towards you. So what would you do? That's moralism. Do you give up? Do you walk away? Do you be more lenient? What do you do? Well, here's what God does. Firstly, he shows astonishing patience to continue to be in relationship with them, despite all that's happened. But in recognition of the fact that you can't forever be in a covenant with people who do not fulfill it or even want to be there, you've got to do something. And Don Carson, the theologian, he says this, the law covenant, it ultimately simply didn't have the power to transform the covenant people of God. It could not work its way out. So picture the scene. World history. Stage left. In comes somebody who can do it. Here comes somebody who can fulfill the requirements of the covenant, both sides, who can make up for all the messes of the people, all their failures, all their brokenness, who can pay the penalty, who can deal with all the curses that the people are living under, all the shame and the guilt and the frustration and the darkness. Like, who is actually capable of fulfilling all of that? And the answer is only God. Only God himself. And so in the darkest moment, in the lowest, most complicated moment, in steps Jesus. And it looks like this.
All of these covenant relationships. We're told that he's from the family of Abraham, and so he will bring the blessings of that family to the whole world. We're told that he's the faithful Israelite who was able to truly obey the law. And we're told that he's the king from the line of David. And so he goes about extending God's kingdom of justice and peace to all.
And that's really remarkable for one guy.
Yeah, and what it highlights is perhaps the most surprising claim of all made about this man, that Jesus is no mere human, but rather God become human. And God did this in order to be that faithful covenant partner that we are all made to be, but have failed to be. And so through Jesus, God has opened up a way for anyone to be in a renewed partnership with him.
So this is what the gospel actually is. This is what the gospel is that the only way for God to remain in relationship with us as human beings was not to try and force us to be better, was not to try and persuade us that we could just live in a higher moral standard to fulfill all the terms of the covenant, because actually we couldn't. It's too hard. It's too much. God did not leave us as feeling in a constant sense of failure with anxiety and guilt because we're not capable. So what does he do? He comes to pay for it himself. He comes to fulfill all of the terms of the covenant, to be faithful to it in ways that we were not able to do it. When Jesus walks into Jerusalem hours from his death, he says these astonishing words, which we're going to repeat in a few minutes' time, from Luke 22. Jesus, at the Passover meal, took bread, gave thanks, and he broke it. And he gave it to them, saying, "This is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." And in the same way, after supper, he takes the cup of wine, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you." You see it? Jesus makes a new covenant with us. On the cross, Jesus walks right the way down the line of death. His body is literally torn apart and broken. His blood pours out. He receives on the cross all of the penalties and all of the curses and all of the darkness, all of the terms of the condition of the old covenant fall on his shoulders. And he takes them to the cross and he dies. In the most astonishing act of love in the whole of human history, Jesus gives his love, his life, to the other covenant side. He is faithful to the covenant in precisely the ways that we can't be and we weren't. And he does it through grace. And he does it through mercy. And he does it through love. The old preacher, Charles Spurgeon, he says it like this: the new covenant is not founded on works at all. It's a covenant of pure, unmingled grace. Jesus fulfills all the curses of the covenant, leaving behind just the blessings for us, so that we can be received, welcomed in to the family of God. Loved, not because we've earned it or because we can figure it out or because we can do it, but because he loved us. You receive a covenant. You receive this one. You receive this one by recognizing that there's no other way. There's no other way to be in a relationship with God. To recognize that we have no ability to do it on our own. We receive this new covenant by accepting the gift of what Jesus did for us on the cross. And we commit our lives to live in the family of God as his covenant people. This is what it means to be a Christian. It's not just for any one group of people either. It's for the whole world. It is our new identity. Who are we becoming? Who are you as a Christian? You are a child of God. You are in the covenant people of God. You are chosen. You are loved. You are forgiven. You are embraced. You are welcomed in by the creator of the universe. You are blessed. You are empowered. And you are free. Look what 1 Peter says of you. Hear these words for yourself today. Because of Jesus, you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Once you were in darkness, but now you are in light. Kay Arthur says this: the new covenant is our guarantee of belonging, of never being forsaken, of never being alone. And so next week we're going to talk about like how you live in this covenant, what it means to be part of it, and what that does for our choices day by day. But right now, we're going to take a moment to reenact the covenant, as Jesus asked us to. There will be no blood on the floor, just so you know. But instead of blood and body, we're going to do it in bread and wine, as Jesus asked us to. Jesus invites us, whenever we gather, to come again and to remake this covenant with, to remember the acts of the cross and to commit ourselves back to be his covenant people. And so, in a moment, we are going to take the bread and the wine. Jesus' body broken for us, his blood poured out for us to make this new covenant. And I'm going to invite you to come forward. I'm going to invite you to come forward and take this bread and wine. I'm going to invite you to do it if you want to make that covenant with Jesus. Maybe it's the first time. Maybe you've never called yourself a Christian before. Maybe you don't have all the answers and you don't fully know how it all technically works out. But you want to enter in to start this new relationship. In which case, come. Maybe you've done it 1,000 times before and you just want to make that covenant again, make it your own as you commit yourself back to Jesus. Come, take communion. But if you're there and you're like, I just don't know if I can do that, I don't know if I'm ready, I don't know if I can say those words, then you're welcome to just stay in your seats if you want to, but you're equally welcome just to come forward as well, and we'll just pray a prayer of blessing. And if you'd like to do that, I'm just going to simply ask that you put your hands over your chest, just as a symbol. It's a sign to just tell us that you don't want to take communion, and we'll pray a prayer of blessing. But it said that the Israelites, they prepared their hearts. She says they did it for 3 days. We've got about 30 seconds. But we're just going to prepare ourselves to come and take communion. And we're going to do it with some silence as the kids come back in, and we're going to do it with some acts of repentance and confession. So let's just get ready.